My name is Dorothy. I am 71 years old, and for the past 4 years, I gave up everything. My social life, my hobbies, my sleep, my health, to care for my husband, Harold, as Alzheimer slowly took him away from me. Not all at once. That would have almost been easier. No, Alzheimer's takes a person piece by piece. A name forgotten here, a face lost there, until one day, the man who had held your hand through 46 years of marriage looks at you like a stranger. But I stayed every single day, because that's what love looks like when the flowers are gone and all that remains is duty, devotion, and an unbreakable promise made before God. I bathed him, I fed him, I turned him in his bed to prevent sores. I sat beside him at 3 in the morning when he called out for his mother, a woman who had been dead for 30 years. I did all of this quietly, without complaint, because Harold would have done the same for me, Dot. And while I was doing all of that, while I was pouring every last drop of myself into caring for this man, my daughter Sandra was busy planning something I never could have imagined. Sandra is our only child. She was raised with love. She never went without. Harold worked as an electrician for 38 years, and I managed the home. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. We owned our house outright. We had savings. We had a small piece of land Harold bought years ago that had quietly grown in value. Sandra knew about all of it. She had also known for years that Harold had designated both of us, me and her, as beneficiaries to his estate. But what she perhaps didn't fully understand, or chose not to care about, was that while Harold was still alive, everything was mine to manage and protect. Sandra visited occasionally. She would bring flowers, smile for 20 minutes, then start asking questions. Mom, has Dad updated his will recently? Mom, have you thought about what happens to the property when? Mom, you really should consider putting things in both our names, just to make it easier later. I always change the subject. I wasn't ready for those conversations. I was too busy keeping Harold alive and comfortable to think about what came after. Looking back now, I understand what she was doing. She was circling, waiting, growing impatient. Dot, it was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. I remember because Tuesdays were Harold's bath days. I had just finished getting him settled back into bed, clean, comfortable, smelling of the lavender soap he'd always loved, when I heard a knock at the front door. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. My heart stopped. They told me they had received a report of suspected elder abuse and neglect at this address. I asked them to repeat themselves. They said it again. Someone had called the authorities and reported that Harold, my Harold, The man I had dedicated 4 years of my life to was being neglected, possibly mistreated. They had a warrant to enter the home and investigate. I stepped aside in a daze. They walked through every room. They looked at Harold's bed, his medications, his skin, his records. One officer photographed the house. Another asked me detailed questions about his care routine, his diet, his medical appointments. And then, before they left, one of them told me they needed to confiscate my cell phone as part of the investigation. My cell phone, the device I use to set medication alarms, to call Harold's doctors, to reach emergency services if something went wrong in the middle of the night. They took it, and they left. I sat down in the kitchen after they were gone, and I stared at the wall for a very long time, because I already knew, in the deepest part of my heart, exactly who had made that call. Sandra came by that evening. She didn't call first. She just showed up, which she almost never did. She stood in my doorway with a look on her face that she must have thought appeared concerned. But I know my daughter. I have known her face since the moment it entered this world. That was not concern. That was performance. She said she had heard there had been some kind of investigation. She said she was worried about Daddy. She said perhaps it was time to think seriously about moving Harold to a professional care facility where he would be properly looked after. And then she said it. And Mom, honestly, this house is too much for you. Maybe we should talk about simplifying things. For both of you, simplifying things. I looked at my daughter, and I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not yet. Something quieter, something cold, and very clear. I told her I was tired and asked her to leave. She hugged me at the door. I let her, but as she walked down the porch steps, I made myself a promise. The authorities completed their investigation within 2 weeks. Every doctor's record, every pharmacy receipt, every caregiver's log I had kept meticulously, because I am that kind of person, told the same story. Harold was receiving exceptional care. He was clean. He was medicated correctly. He had no bed sores, no infections, no signs of neglect or abuse. His physician submitted a statement calling his home care exemplary. The case was closed. No charges were filed. And now it was my turn. I called an attorney, a woman named Margaret Chen, who had been recommended to me by Harold's doctor. I told her everything, from Sandra's questions about the will, to the police visit, to the confiscated phone, to Sandra appearing at my door that same evening. Margaret listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dorothy, what your daughter did has a name. It's called a vexatious complaint, and in your state, filing a false report of elder abuse, especially when it can be proven to be motivated by financial gain, carries serious legal consequences. She asked me if I wanted to pursue it. I told her yes. What followed was 3 months of quiet, careful, deliberate work. Margaret subpoenaed Sandra's phone records. The call to the abuse hotline had been made from Sandra's number, something Sandra had apparently not thought through. We gathered the timeline of her increasingly pointed questions about Harold's estate, the will, the property. We documented the fact that she had made the report and then shown up at my home that same evening, clearly aware of what had happened. We gathered testimony from Harold's care team, his doctors, 2 neighbors who had watched me care for him and were appalled by what Sandra had done. And we filed a civil lawsuit against Sandra for defamation, malicious prosecution, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The claim for damages was substantial because what Sandra had done to me was not a small thing. While I was sitting in my kitchen without a phone, my only lifeline to emergency services, Harold could have had a crisis. He had fallen before. He had needed emergency help before. Taking my phone was not an inconvenience, Dot. It was dangerous, Dot. It was cruel. And it was done deliberately by my own daughter. For money, Sandra hired a lawyer. He was expensive, confident, the kind of man who walks into a courtroom like he's already won. He argued that Sandra had acted out of genuine concern, that she had truly believed her father was being neglected, that a loving daughter, worried about her parents, could not be punished for trying to protect them. Margaret let him finish. Then she laid out the evidence. The phone records showing Sandra made the call herself, the timeline of her financial questions leading up to the report, the investigative findings clearing me completely, the testimony of Harold's medical team, my caregiver logs, 4 years of daily entries, medication times, doctor appointments, notes about Harold's moods and meals and moments of clarity. And then Margaret said something I will never forget. She said, "Your Honor, Dorothy spent 4 years giving her life to care for her husband. She did not neglect him. She did not abuse him. She loved him every single day in the most difficult and thankless way a person can love another human being. And her daughter used that love, used Dorothy's vulnerability, her exhaustion, her grief, as a weapon to try to take what wasn't hers." The courtroom was silent. The judge ruled in my favor. Sandra was found liable for malicious prosecution and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The damages awarded were significant, enough to cover my legal fees, compensate for the emotional harm caused, and serve as a genuine consequence for what she had done. Sandra sat at that table and would not look at me. I did not look away from her. I wanted her to know that I saw her, that I had always seen her, and that the woman she had tried to destroy was still standing. Harold passed away 8 months after the lawsuit concluded. He went peacefully in his own bed, in the home he had loved, with my hand in his dart at the very end. There was a moment, one of those rare, piercing moments of clarity that sometimes come to Alzheimer's patients in their final hours, where he looked at me and said my name, just my name, the way he used to say it when we were young. That was enough. That was everything. I did not invite Sandra to the funeral. That was my choice, and I do not apologize for it. She sent a card. I read it once and put it away. Some people will say I should have forgiven her, that she is my daughter, my flesh, and that family is family no matter what. Maybe they're right. Maybe someday, but forgiveness, when it comes, will be something I offer in private, between me and God, and the memory of a man who deserved far better than the family that gathered around his dying days, like vultures waiting for what was left. Harold always said, Dorothy, what people do in the dark always comes to light. He was right, it always does. And when it does, karma gets the final word, if this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know, or a battle you fought, or a love you've witnessed, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you're new here, welcome to Karma's Final Word. These stories are inspired by real experiences. The names and details have been changed to protect privacy. New episodes every week. Stay strong. Stay patient. Justice has a way of finding us.